The arrival of Melara. The airlock hissed open, and Ambassador Melara of the Zinter Union stepped onto Earth's flagship station, Babylon. The shimmering light from the distant stars above refracted off the station's walls, casting a soft glow on the vast interior. As her feet met the metallic surface of the station, Melara felt a shiver of anticipation. She had traveled light years for this moment, the chance to engage with humanity, the most enigmatic species in the galaxy. The Earthlings were known for their strange customs, but it was their reliance on weaponry that truly baffled the galactic community. Melara had heard countless stories about humans. They were incredibly resourceful, resilient, and, above all, they carried weapons, always. It was said that no human ever stepped foot in public without some form of defense. Yet, as a diplomat, her role was to understand, not judge. Today, she would uncover the truth behind this peculiar habit. As the airlock slid shut behind her, the towering structure of Babylon Station stretched out before her, a blend of advanced technology and alien design. The central atrium was vast, far larger than she had imagined, with sleek pathways that crisscrossed in all directions. Above, the station's artificial sky shimmered, a translucent dome that simulated the endless expanse of space. Ships of various sizes came and went, adding a lively buzz to the scene. But it wasn't the ships or the technology that caught Melara's eye. It was the humans. Everywhere she looked, they were armed. Tall ones, short ones, old and young. All wore weapons in plain view. It wasn't the soft, harmless atmosphere she expected from a diplomatic station. It felt like an armed fortress. Melara's gaze drifted to the guards stationed at every corner, each wearing heavy armor and gripping enormous weapons. Her Zinter species, known for their calm and diplomatic demeanor, had long ago evolved away from the need for physical defense. The contrast was startling. Why did humans need to be so heavily armed? What was their obsession with defense? Ambassador Melara, I presume. The voice was smooth, confident, and instantly put her at ease. She turned to see a human woman approaching. Dressed in a crisp black uniform, adorned with insignia Melara didn't immediately recognize. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her sharp blue eyes gleamed with an expression that conveyed both authority and warmth. I'm Evelyn Riker, the Earth Systems Ambassador, the woman said, extending a hand in greeting. The firmness of her grip surprised Melara. This was a diplomat who understood the weight of her position. Welcome to Babylon Station, Riker continued. I'm looking forward to showing you what Earth is truly about. I hope your journey was pleasant. Melara smiled, though the question had a deeper meaning. Pleasant enough. Though, I must admit, I'm fascinated by your station and your people. You appear to be constantly armed. Riker's eyes twinkled. Ah, I see. You've already noticed. It is a bit overwhelming at first, isn't it? But please, follow me. I'll explain. As they walked through the bustling station, Melara tried to keep her focus on Riker, but it was impossible to ignore the weapons everywhere. From the sleek blasters on the hips of casual civilians to the enormous rifles slung over the shoulders of soldiers, the entire station seemed to be a showcase of human firepower. Even the maintenance workers, their faces hidden behind helmets, had weapons strapped to their sides. You must think us quite strange, Riker said, reading her thoughts. But for humans, weapons are tools, just like any other. We don't think of them as symbols of violence, but of safety, of defense, of survival. Melara raised an eyebrow. Safety? From whom? From anyone, Riker said, her voice quiet but firm. Humans have had to fight for their place in the universe. From the earliest days of our species, we've faced challenges that have shaped our culture. We don't just live in harmony with nature. We fight for our survival in ways that few others can understand. Melara pondered this. She had read much about the human history, wars, struggles, and a constant drive for progress. But it was one thing to study it from a distance, and another to witness it in person. The constant presence of weapons spoke volumes about the humans' mentality. They had learned to live with the constant awareness of danger, shaping their very being around it. I've heard humans are known for their resilience. Mylara mused aloud. We are, Ricker agreed. But more than that, we're adaptable. We thrive in environments others might falter in. We find solutions when the odds are against us. And part of that is our relationship with our weapons. They turned a corner, and Mylara's eyes widened at the sight ahead. Through a large transparent window, she saw a training area. Humans, both young and old, practicing their marksmanship. Some were holding laser rifles, others training with bladed weapons, all firing at targets that appeared to be holographic. They're all soldiers? Mylara asked, surprised to see even children handling weapons with such ease. Wrecker chuckled. Oh no, these are just regular civilians. Marksmanship is a skill we all learn, regardless of age. It's part of our culture, learning how to defend yourself, how to use tools to survive. It's a rite of passage for every human. Mylara stood silent for a moment, watching the humans' fluid movements, their deep familiarity with their weapons. There was no fear in their eyes, only a quiet confidence that she found both alien and fascinating. This is unexpected, Mylara said, but it makes sense now. I can see why the rest of the galaxy doesn't quite understand your people. You aren't just armed out of necessity. You carry your weapons as a part of who you are. Exactly, Ricker replied, nodding. Humanity doesn't rely on weapons because we're warlike. We rely on them because we've learned to never underestimate the challenges life throws at us. And once you've been here a little longer, you'll understand how deeply ingrained this mindset is. The diplomat's gaze turned inward, reflecting on the journey ahead. If she was going to learn about humanity, she would need to peel back layers upon layers of history, culture, and instinct. But one thing was already clear. There was far more to the humans than their weapons. As they walked deeper into Babylon Station, Mylara couldn't shake the feeling that the journey she had begun would change everything she thought she knew about the universe and about humanity. The weapon of peace. As Ambassador Mylara followed Evelyn Ricker deeper into Babylon Station, her thoughts churned. She had expected to see a militarized society, but nothing had prepared her for the overwhelming presence of weapons, not as tools of war, but as a core part of humanity's identity. Humans wore their weapons like second skin, proudly, confidently, without fear. And yet, as Ricker had said, these tools weren't for aggression. Mylara was beginning to wonder if she truly understood what it meant to be human. Their walk through the station led them to a more serene part of the station, where lush gardens bloomed in stark contrast to the steel and machinery around them. Here, the air was thick with the scent of alien flowers, their petals glowing softly in the artificial light. Humans milled about, chatting in low voices, some resting on benches, others walking with purpose. But still, even here, the weapons were visible. It was as if they were an extension of the humans themselves. Ricker noticed Mylara's lingering gaze. It's strange, isn't it, to see so many people carrying weapons in such peaceful surroundings? Mylara nodded. I don't understand. You've been at war, haven't you? Your history is filled with conflict and bloodshed. Yet these weapons seem like a part of you. You act as though you don't fear them, or the violence they represent. Evelyn smiled, but it was a smile tinged with sorrow. You're right about our history. Wars, conflicts, struggles. They're all part of humanity's past. But we've learned something over the centuries. We've learned that weapons, in the right hands, don't just destroy. They protect. They preserve. Mylara stopped in her tracks, her brow furrowing. Protect? You mean these weapons are a way of keeping the peace? Yes, Ricker said. Weapons are tools, Mylara. Nothing more. Tools that humans have learned to wield with a sense of responsibility. We don't seek conflict. We seek peace. But peace doesn't come without cost. We've learned it the hard way. They continued walking through the gardens, now surrounded by the distant hum of machinery and the softer murmur of conversation. Humans were discussing their daily lives, exchanging ideas, and debating politics, but never with the kind of aggression Melara had expected. Instead, there was a quiet intensity to their interactions, as if they understood that their fragile peace could be shattered at any moment. "Let me show you something," Wrecker said, guiding Melara toward a set of large glass doors. The space beyond was unlike anything Melara had seen before. Inside was a hall, vast and airy, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch infinitely upwards. The walls were lined with holographic displays, showcasing the history of human civilization. It was a mixture of achievements and failures, technological marvels and destructive wars, moments of peace and moments of chaos. But what caught Melara's attention wasn't the displays. It was the large, intricate sculpture in the center of the room. The sculpture was a representation of a human, carved in great detail, holding a massive weapon. The weapon, however, was pointed downward, its barrel resting gently on the ground. It was a symbol, Melara realized, not of aggression, but of restraint. The weapon was a tool, not to be used recklessly, but only when necessary. "This is the symbol of humanity's philosophy," Ricker explained, stepping beside Melara. "We believe that peace can only be achieved when we are ready to defend it. This sculpture represents our understanding that power, when used unwisely, can bring ruin, but when used with wisdom, it can ensure peace. It's a lesson that was hard-earned." Melara studied the sculpture, the weight of Ricker's words settling in. It wasn't just that humans had learned to fight. They had learned the value of self-restraint, the balance between strength and compassion. It was a strange duality that Melara had never encountered before in any other species. "I've always heard that humans are paradoxical," Melara said softly. "Your weapons, your wars, your resilience, it all seems to go against the idea of peace." "That's the paradox," Wrecker said with a knowing smile. "To understand peace, we had to understand war. To understand life, we had to face death. We don't shy away from the harsh truths of existence. We face them head-on, with everything we have." Melara's mind was whirling. She had expected to find a species that used weapons for conquest, for destruction. Instead, she was discovering a people who wielded their power not for domination, but for protection, for preservation of what they held dear. And in that, there was a wisdom that transcended simple conflict. As they walked out of the hall, Ricker's tone grew more serious. "I know what you're thinking, Melara, that this doesn't make sense, that a species so determined to protect itself is somehow flawed or dangerous. But that's not the case. Humanity's relationship with weapons is not about aggression. It's about responsibility. We've learned the hard way that peace requires vigilance. But more than that, it requires the willingness to fight for it when it's threatened." Melara's gaze softened. She had come to Earth expecting to learn about a species driven by violence. But now, she was beginning to see that humanity's strength came from their capacity to balance aggression with wisdom, to understand that peace was fragile and worth defending. It wasn't the guns and rifles that defined humanity. It was their will to protect, their ability to choose when to fight and when to hold back. And as she continued her tour of Babylon Station, Melara realized that the true story of humanity had only just begun to unfold. There was so much more to learn, and so much more to understand about this peculiar, resilient species. The Diplomat's journey had only just started, and already the mysteries of human nature were beginning to unravel. The heart of humanity. As Ambassador Melara walked through the corridors of Babylon Station, her thoughts became more tangled. The humans she had met so far, though stern and resolute, were not the warlike, aggressive species she had expected. They were shaped by centuries of conflict, yes, but they wore their weapons not as tools of conquest, but as symbols of their deeper philosophy, a philosophy that valued peace, yet recognized the harsh realities of survival. Melara couldn't help but be captivated by this idea. What kind of species could be so capable of destruction, yet choose to focus on protecting and preserving life. Humans had learned to use their strength not recklessly, but with a measure of responsibility and thoughtfulness. As a diplomat, she had studied their history, their literature, and their art, but nothing prepared her for the experience of encountering them in person, in all their complexity. Wrecker led her to a new section of Babylon Station, one where the sterile environment of technology gave way to something more organic, more human. This part of the station was dedicated to human culture and creativity. The walls were adorned with murals depicting humans in various acts of triumph, overcoming natural disasters, building great cities, and even peacefully resolving conflicts. The images, though abstract, conveyed the essence of human perseverance. The humanities are the heart of humanity, Wrecker said, sensing Mylaura's silent awe as they walked. We are a species that believes in progress, in self-improvement. But our progress isn't just measured in technology or military might. It's also in our creativity, our ability to dream. They arrived at a large, circular room. In the center, a holographic display flickered to life, showing an animated depiction of a human city. Tall buildings stretched upward like great trees, and vast green parks sprawled across the landscape. Hovercrafts zipped across the sky, and humans of all different colors and backgrounds moved together in harmony. Is this how Earth will look in the future? Mylaura asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Wrecker smiled. It's a vision, yes, but we've come a long way to get there. This is a glimpse of what we strive for, a balance of nature and technology, peace and progress. But getting here wasn't easy. It took a lot of struggle, and most importantly, a lot of learning. Learning? Mylaura echoed. From what? From our mistakes, Wrecker replied, her eyes darkening slightly. We've made a lot of them. Wars, environmental destruction, inequality. It's been a long road, but it's our capacity to learn from those mistakes that has defined us as a species. We don't just survive, Mylaura. We evolve. We adapt. And part of that evolution has been our growing understanding of the importance of cooperation. A holographic display shifted, showing scenes of humans coming together to solve problems, tackling climate change, rebuilding after natural disasters, and working alongside alien species like the Zinter. The images were hopeful, and Mylaura could see the promise of a brighter future. It's our creativity, our drive to make the world better, that sets us apart, Wrecker continued. It's not enough to be resilient or resourceful. We have to create. We have to inspire others, to bring hope where there was once despair. That's how humanity has survived, by constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible, both physically and mentally. Mylaura stood quietly, taking in the images, her mind racing. She had always believed that strength was about physical power, the ability to defeat enemies and conquer challenges. But the humans had shown her something different. Their true strength lay not in their weapons, but in their creativity, in their unyielding desire to build, to grow, and to heal. It was an invisible strength, one that could not be measured by guns or wars, but by the dreams and innovations that came from the human heart. As they continued their tour, Wrecker led Mylaura into a large gallery filled with art. There were paintings, sculptures, and digital installations, each telling a story of human resilience and triumph. Some works were abstract, others hyper-realistic, but all conveyed a singular theme: the drive to endure and to create beauty in the face of adversity. This is our soul, Mylaura, Wrecker said, gesturing to the art. These are the pieces of ourselves that we leave behind, the pieces that endure. Our ability to create is what makes us human. It's why we fight so hard to preserve peace, why we cling to hope even in the darkest times. It's the thing that allows us to rebuild, no matter how many times we fall. Mylaura's heart stirred as she gazed at one piece in particular, a painting of a ruined city, with a single figure standing among the rubble. The figure was human, holding a small plant in their hand, its green leaves standing in stark contrast to the gray, desolate landscape. The image was hauntingly beautiful, and Mylara could almost feel the weight of the human spirit captured in that single moment. "You see," Wrecker said softly, "humanity doesn't just fight for survival. We fight for meaning, for connection, for the future. Our weapons, our technology, all of it, these are tools. But our creativity, our ability to dream, to build, to restore, this is the heart of who we are." Mylara felt a deep, quiet respect for the humans begin to grow within her. She had come to understand that their strength did not come from their weapons alone. It came from something far more profound, an unbreakable will to push forward, to create a better world, and to make sure that their history, both the painful and the triumphant, was never forgotten. The Diplomat's journey into the heart of humanity was far from over, but now she had begun to see what truly set humans apart. It wasn't their guns or their wars. It was their ability to rebuild, to dream, and most of all, to inspire. And as Mylara stood in that gallery, she realized that the story of humanity was one she would never forget. The price of peace. Ambassador Mylara's footsteps echoed softly through the corridors of Babylon Station as she reflected on the journey that had unfolded before her. She had seen the guns, the power, and the strength, but it was humanity's ability to create, its resilience in the face of adversity, that had begun to truly captivate her. However, as Wrecker had hinted, there was something deeper beneath this outward strength. It wasn't just the desire to protect, to preserve, or to build. It was the understanding that peace came with a cost, a price humanity had learned to pay. "Ambassador Mylara, if you're ready, I'd like to show you something else," Wrecker said, her tone softer than before. There was an air of solemnity in her voice now, a quiet understanding that their conversation had only touched the surface. Mylara looked up from her thoughts, surprised by the change in tone. "Of course, Ambassador Wrecker. What else is there to see?" Wrecker led Mylara to a part of Babylon Station that felt different from the rest. The walls here were darker, and the atmosphere was more subdued, almost reverent. It was as though they were entering a space that demanded respect, a space where history was etched into every surface. "This is the Hall of Sacrifice," Wrecker explained quietly as they entered the room. "It's dedicated to the humans who have given their lives, their families, their futures, in the pursuit of peace." The room stretched out before them, lined with holographic displays that flickered with images from Earth's darkest chapters. Mylara could see human soldiers, their faces weary but resolute, standing on foreign battlefields, fighting not for conquest, but for survival, defending their people, their homes, their values. "Humans are often depicted as a species of warriors," Wrecker continued. "But the truth is, we've fought most of our wars because we've had no other choice. Whether it's a conflict within our own world or a struggle to defend our existence against external threats, the price of peace is high." Mylara was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the holograms of soldiers. She had seen such images before, conflicts between species, wars fought for power or territory. But what struck her now was the emotion that seemed to pour from each image, the heavy toll these wars had taken on humanity's soul. These weren't just soldiers. They were individuals with families, hopes, and dreams, each one sacrificing their future to protect what they believed in. Wrecker gestured toward a particular image that stood out. A young human woman, no older than 30, with a face set in determination. She stood on a battlefield, her weapon drawn, but there was a look in her eyes that spoke of a deep, unshakable grief. A mother, perhaps, or a daughter. Her humanity was evident in the expression that spoke of love, loss, and the unbearable weight of duty. "This is one of our own," Wrecker said, her voice tinged with sadness. Her name was Captain Amelia Scott. She was part of the Earth Defense Force during the Great Calamity. She gave her life protecting a colony of refugees during an invasion by the Rock, an alien species that threatened to wipe out everything we had worked for. Mylara stood still, the weight of Wrecker's words settling in her chest. She had read about the great calamity, about the human struggle against the rock. But the cold facts on a page could never compare to the stories etched into the faces of these individuals. Each sacrifice was a person, a life lost for the sake of something greater. She was a hero, Mylara whispered, almost to herself. But at what cost? How can a species live with so much loss? Riker met her gaze, her expression hardening. We don't just live with loss, Mylara. We honor it. We carry it forward, and it shapes who we are. Every life lost teaches us something. It reminds us that peace isn't something that comes easily. It requires sacrifice. And we never forget the price. Mylara's mind reeled. She had heard many tales of war, of alien species fighting for dominance, but there was something uniquely human about this willingness to pay the price for peace. It wasn't the glory of battle that motivated these people. It was the love for their home, for their families, for each other. Do the humans regret their wars? Mylara asked. Riker's voice softened, and her eyes took on a faraway look. Regret is a complicated thing for us. We've made mistakes. We've waged wars that should never have been fought, and we've caused pain we can never undo. But the one thing that keeps us moving forward is the belief that the cost of peace is always worth it. We never stop fighting for a better future. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air as they moved through the hall. Each new image, each new face, was a reminder that humanity's strength was not just in their victories, but in their willingness to pay the ultimate price for the greater good. Mylara stopped in front of another display, this one showing the human child, no older than 7 or 8, holding a broken toy in one hand, a small rifle slung over their shoulder. The child's eyes were wide with fear, but there was also a determination that matched any adult. It was an image of hope and despair intertwined, an innocence lost too soon, but a resilience that spoke of humanity's unbreakable spirit. Every generation of humans has been tested, Riker said, her voice thick with emotion. But we carry on. We fight for the future, for the hope that things can always be better. Even in the darkest moments, we find the light. And in that fight, we are united. Mylara stood in silence, absorbing everything she had seen. The humans were not the perfect beings she had imagined. They were flawed, scared by war and loss, but there was a strength in them that was undeniable. Their resilience, their willingness to sacrifice for the greater good, it was this that made them who they were. And as the diplomat gazed at the faces of the fallen, she realized that this was the true answer to her question. Why were humans so heavily armed? It was not because they sought to dominate others, but because they had learned that true peace required not only strength, but the courage to stand up against the forces that threatened it. It was a lesson that Mylara would carry with her for the rest of her life. "Thank you, Evelyn," Mylara said softly, her voice filled with newfound understanding. "I think I finally understand." Riker nodded, her expression solemn but proud. "I'm glad, Mylara. But there's still much more to learn about us. And as you continue to observe humanity, I hope you'll see that the true strength of our people lies not just in the weapons we carry, but in the hearts that drive us to use them." The diplomat stood silent for a moment longer, her mind awash with the stories of sacrifice and survival she had witnessed. There was much left to learn about humanity, but she now knew the most important lesson of all. Peace for humanity was never given. It was earned. The unexpected bond. Ambassador Mylara had spent the last few days on Babylon Station in a state of quiet reflection. The images of sacrifice, of courage in the face of adversity, lingered in her mind. Humans were a species defined not just by their ingenuity and creativity, but by their capacity for empathy, for understanding. Their strength, it seemed, was not just in their weapons or their will to protect, but in their ability to form connections, to build bonds even in the harshest of circumstances. But there was still much Mylara didn't understand. How could a species so deeply shaped by conflict also be the architects of such profound peace? As she walked alongside Ambassador Evelyn Riker through the crowded central corridor of Babylon Station, The clamor of voices and the hum of machinery filled the air. This section of the station felt more like a bustling metropolis than a diplomatic hub, with humans and aliens alike moving with purpose and determination. Still, my Lara couldn't help but notice the quiet interactions that seemed to occur everywhere. Small, fleeting moments of connection. Humans are fascinating. My Lara mused aloud, her gaze flicking to a group of humans who were helping an elderly alien carry a load of supplies. You speak of peace, but I see so many acts of kindness and cooperation. It's unexpected. Riker smiled, her eyes softening. That's the heart of humanity, Melara. We're a species driven by connection. It's not enough to survive or even to protect. What truly matters to us is who we do it for. We're always seeking to understand, to share, and to build something greater than ourselves. Melara nodded thoughtfully, her eyes following a young woman who was crouched beside a child, sharing a laugh as she helped the youngster fix a broken toy. The simplicity of the moment struck her. Here, in the middle of a space station teeming with life, she saw a human taking the time to nurture, to teach, and to care for another. I've seen many species across the galaxy, Melara said slowly, and many believe they are the center of the universe. But there's something about your people, something that makes you believe in something greater than yourselves. You fight, you sacrifice, you create, but you also care. Riker's expression grew serious. It's not always easy, Melara. We've struggled with our dark side too. There's been violence, hatred, and the desire for power. But over time, we've learned that true strength doesn't come from conquering others. It comes from understanding them. From recognizing that everyone, no matter their origin or their differences, has something valuable to offer. They stopped before a small observation window, looking out at the vastness of space. The stars sparkled in the distance, and the endless expanse seemed to reflect the limitless potential of humanity itself. Yet Melara could sense the weight of Riker's words. Does it always come so easily? Melara asked, turning her gaze toward the human ambassador. This desire to understand, to care. Riker exhaled slowly, her eyes flicking to the stars outside. No, it doesn't. It's something we have to work at every day. There are times when we fall short, when our differences get in the way, and when fear takes hold. But even in those moments, we try to remember that the greatest battles are not fought in the heat of combat. They are fought in the quiet moments of understanding. That's when real progress is made. Melara absorbed the words, turning them over in her mind. Her species, the Xintar, had always relied on intellect, on diplomacy, on calculated peace. They prided themselves on their ability to avoid conflict, to outthink their opponents. But what she was witnessing in the humans, their ability to bridge the gap between worlds, to open their hearts even to strangers, was a form of strength she had never encountered before. This bond you speak of, Melara said softly, is it something that comes naturally to your species, or is it something you've learned? Riker paused before answering, her voice thoughtful. We've had to learn it, Melara. There was a time when we didn't understand the value of true cooperation. We fought against each other for power, for resources, for pride. But through those struggles, we learned something invaluable, that no matter how far we reach, no matter how many stars we explore, our greatest resource is each other. And the more we've learned to care for one another, the stronger we've become. Melara was silent for a long moment, the words sinking deep into her consciousness. She had assumed that strength was something that could be measured by military might, by technological advancements, or by the ability to dominate. But what she was witnessing now was a different kind of strength, one that wasn't defined by victory over others, but by the bonds forged between individuals, between species, and between worlds. Do you think other species can learn this? Melara asked, her voice barely a whisper. This bond you speak of. Riker's eyes sparkled with quiet conviction. I believe so. It's not easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. But I think the galaxy can be a place where cooperation, understanding, and compassion can thrive. Maybe one day, the rest of the universe will understand that peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of connection. Melara was struck by the simplicity of Ricker's words. Perhaps that was the key to understanding humanity. This deep-seated belief that peace wasn't something to be taken for granted, but something to be nurtured, fought for, and protected. It wasn't a perfect ideal, but it was a commitment to something greater than oneself. And in that, there was something deeply admirable. As they continued their walk, Melara couldn't help but feel that her journey to understand humanity was far from over. The diplomat had come to Earth with preconceived notions about weapons, about strength, about the price of peace. But she was leaving with something far more profound, the understanding that true power was not in dominance, but in connection. In the days ahead, Melara would continue her observations, her conversations, and her studies. But one thing was certain, her view of humanity had forever shifted. They were no longer just a species defined by war or weaponry. They were defined by their ability to build bridges, to find common ground, and to reach out to one another in the name of something greater. And it was that spirit of cooperation, that endless drive to connect, that would ultimately shape the future of the galaxy. The trial of trust. Ambassador Melara's time on Babylon Station had opened her eyes to the depth of humanity's resilience, creativity, and compassion. However, despite everything she had learned, there was still something that bothered her. It was a question that had lingered at the back of her mind ever since she set foot on Earth's station. She had seen the strength of their unity, the brilliance of their minds, and the warmth of their connections. But what about their ability to trust others? After all, trust was the foundation upon which peace and cooperation were built, and humans had been through so much. Wars, betrayals, struggles. Could they truly trust anyone outside their own species? Ambassador Wrecker, Melara began one quiet morning as they walked through the station. You've shown me the best of humanity, their creativity, their strength, and their capacity for connection. But how can you trust others? After all you've been through, after the wars, the losses, how can you trust anyone outside your own kind? Ricker glanced at her, and for the first time, Melara saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. That's a fair question, Melara, she said softly. Trust isn't something we give away freely. It's earned, and it's tested. But it's something we've had to learn, especially as we've begun interacting with other species. Trusting others, especially those who are not human, has been one of the greatest challenges we've faced. Melara felt a sharp pang of curiosity. And how did you come to trust those beyond your own species? Ricker turned her gaze toward the window as they passed it, her face pensive. It didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process, learning to understand the motives of others, seeing that we weren't so different after all. But one of the pivotal moments came during the first human-Zinter peace talks. The mention of her own species' involvement caught Melara's attention, and she stopped walking, her eyes locking onto Ricker's. The peace talks? She asked. I wasn't aware that the Zinter and humans had a history of conflict. Ricker smiled faintly. We didn't, but at the beginning, we were strangers, and that's always a little frightening. We were so different in our ways of thinking, in how we approach diplomacy. The Zinter have always been about logic, about calculation. Humans, on the other hand, had a tendency to mix emotion with reason, something that can be unsettling to a species like ours. Melara was intrigued. So, how did the talks go? Did you learn to trust each other? It was a trial, Ricker replied, a shadow crossing her face. We came to the table with our reservations, our suspicions. The Zinter were skeptical of our motives, and the humans were just as wary. We knew each other's histories, the raids, the misunderstandings, the near conflict. It wasn't easy to see beyond the differences. Ricker paused, her voice turning serious as she continued. But what changed the course of that first meeting was an act of trust, a leap that no one expected. During the negotiations, a Zinter delegate, Ambassador Ilith, was attacked, targeted by a rogue faction that believed the peace talks were a betrayal. They tried to assassinate him right in front of everyone. Milara's breath caught in her throat. What happened? Ricker's eyes darkened as she recalled the memory. The human delegation, despite all the mistrust between us, stood their ground. The humans didn't hesitate. They protected Ambassador Elith, putting their own lives at risk to shield him from the attackers. It was an incredible moment, one that changed everything. The weight of the story hit Milara hard. She had always believed that diplomacy and trust were negotiated, one calculated word at a time. But what she was hearing was different. This was a moment where the very core of trust was put to the test in the heat of danger, and the humans passed it. They risked their lives for Azinter, Milara whispered, still grappling with the magnitude of what she had just learned. Yes, Ricker said, her voice quiet but firm. And in that moment, something shifted. Trust was no longer just an abstract concept. It became something tangible. The humans proved that, despite our differences, they were willing to risk everything for the sake of peace. In that instant, we saw what humanity was truly capable of, not just in war, but in moments of shared humanity. They showed us that trust isn't something that can be demanded. It's something that must be earned through actions. Milara felt a deep respect for the humans that she hadn't experienced before. She had heard the stories of their wars, their trials, and their survival. But now she understood something far more profound. For all their strength, for all their innovation, humanity's greatest gift was their ability to build trust, even with those who were once their enemies. Ricker glanced at Milara, her face softened by the memory. It wasn't easy after that, of course. The road to trust is always a difficult one. But that moment began the transformation. And from there, we learned to rely on one another. Humans and Zinter. We've worked together on countless projects, from diplomatic missions to scientific endeavors. And in each of those moments, trust has been our foundation. Milara was silent for a long time, her mind processing the weight of what Ricker had shared. She had come to Babylon Station, seeking answers about humanity's obsession with weapons, their willingness to fight, and their resilience. But now she understood that the true strength of humanity was not just in their ability to defend themselves, but in their capacity to trust, to protect, and to extend a hand to those who needed it most, even in the face of danger. Ricker's voice broke the silence. And that, Milara, is why humanity is so heavily armed. It's not to conquer or destroy. It's because we've learned, the hard way, that peace requires trust, and trust requires protection. And sometimes, to protect peace, we must first protect those who are willing to take that leap of faith with us. Milara nodded slowly, her heart filled with newfound understanding. The lesson had been clear. Trust, like peace, wasn't something that could be given. It had to be earned through action. And it was in those actions, those moments of shared vulnerability and bravery, that humanity had truly shown its worth. As she continued her journey on Babylon Station, Milara knew one thing for certain. The bond between humans and the rest of the galaxy wasn't just about diplomacy. It was about trust. And for the first time, she was beginning to see that humanity had mastered that art in ways she had never imagined.